Welcome to the Psychology Podcast, where we give you insights into the mind, brain, behavior, and creativity. I'm Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman, and in each episode I have a conversation with a guest who will stimulate your mind and give you a greater understanding of yourself, others, and the world we live in. Hopefully we'll also provide a glimpse into human possibility. Thanks for listening and enjoy the podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have Sara Algoe on the podcast. Dr. Algoe is Associate Professor of Social Psychology at the University of Virginia. Her expertise spans emotions, relationships, and health psychology. Her basic research questions illuminate the social interactions that are at the heart of high-quality relationships. These include giving to others, expressing gratitude, and sharing laughter. Thanks so much for chatting with me today, Sara.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, your research does span quite a gamut, but there is a theme there. There's a theme.
I can't quit gratitude.
There's something there. Well, oh, that's funny. I was going to say the theme was relationships.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, that's what it has been, especially lately. Yeah.
So I thought we'd start there because gratitude seems to be only one part of a larger umbrella for you. And I thought we could start by explaining to me, what is this phrase you use? What does this mean? Positive interpersonal process.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
What is that? Is that something I want? Do I want that? Is that a good thing?
For the most part, it's usually a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all the good stuff in your relationships. It's the reason that you want to hang out with your friends. It's the goodness that infuses your very favorite relationships, maybe with your favorite aunt or a romantic partner. And so these are things like laughing together and expressing gratitude and sharing moments of joy with someone. So you find out something great happened and you tell them about it, and then they're excited with you. In the ideal situation, they're also excited with you. And so that can amplify the kind of positivity of the moment. And so positive interpersonal processes are really these kind of great little opportunities in everyday life where one person or both people experience a positive emotion, and then by the way that it's communicated and then the way that the other person responds, it can provide opportunities for connection.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm thinking of two research programs that seem to relate to this. One is Love 2.0 by Barbara Fredrickson.
Yeah.
That's not a research program, sorry, that's her book. That's the book title. But her research program on the positive micro moments of love and connection. And then also, you made me think of Sharon Salzberg's work on love, and maybe comes in a different direction because she's not a psychologist, but she's a Buddhist meditator. And for some reason, I felt like it dovetailed nicely with your work of kind of having to, like, being in the moment with the person for a good, solid relationship.
Yeah. It's actually really interesting that you say that. So I started studying positive emotions, little moments of positive emotions. If you don't mind, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of
please do.
How I got here, because
we love that on the Psychology Podcast.
Ties everything together. And so when I was in graduate school at the University of Virginia, I started studying positive emotions, and I was really especially interested in how these moments between people can, all these kind of everyday things that happen in our environment. So you might admire someone, or somebody might do something that makes you feel grateful. And so I started studying those when I was at Virginia, and I worked with three really awesome emotions researchers. So Tim Wilson, Don Haidt, and Jimmy Clore. It didn't take very long for me to get into studying emotions, and especially my interest in how they shape interpersonal interactions, to realize that actually a lot of people who study emotions just focus on the person who's experiencing the emotion in the moment. But my interest was really in how they actually coordinate behavior between people. So I started working with gratitude way back when, and that was this moment when I was really realizing that gratitude is really about connecting people together. And if that's true, then you should be able to see the effect of one person's gratitude on the other person. And so I started getting into trying to figure out how to study these moments interpersonally, kind of really bringing in both sides of the coin. And so then I actually went off to do a postdoc with Shelley Gable, who was doing a lot of work on positive relationship processes. So she was studying what happens when you share joy with someone else. And then she found that not only does it make you feel good to share your good news with people and you start to feel better about yourself, but the way that they respond really makes you it changes the way that you think about the opportunity that came up for you. So like you've got a promotion at work, and if the other person says, oh man, we're never going to see you anymore because you're going to be working all the time. Instead of saying, oh, that's so great, you've been working so hard for that, that really makes a difference for the person who's experiencing that moment. So anyway, so she was doing all this really great stuff and awesome methodological stuff, working with couples over time and looking at daily reporting from each member of the couple and doing sophisticated statistical modeling. And I really wanted to work with her to figure out how to test gratitude in this context as well, in this like more interactive kind of opportunity. So then I started, thankfully got a postdoc to work with Shelley as one of my mentors.
What year was this now?
When was that? That was 2005.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I started talking to Barb Fredrickson. And so then we kind of started having these really great conversations about positive emotions and in ongoing interactions. And so she asked me to join her lab as well. And so I was able to join her as a postdoc. And so she started studying love and kindness meditation with Sharon Salzberg. And so that was right around that time that we kind of all connected. And so it's funny to hear you bring up Barb and Sharon, because since that time, we've had several collaborations that kind of came as a result of that path that I took along the way. So, and she was, of course, Barb's Bardman build theory of positive emotions was like one of the things that was really exciting to me when I started studying emotions, because gosh, I am getting really excited talking about all this right now, actually.
That's great.
Great animated. But so Barb's Brodmann build theory of positive emotions came out around the time that I was in graduate school studying the emotion of gratitude. And it really, again, in the same way that a lot of emotions researchers had been focused on how the emotion changes the person experiencing the emotion's own thoughts and feelings and behavior, many emotions researchers had also really focused on the negative emotions. So we knew a lot about anger and sadness and things like that. And sometimes researchers would study a positive emotion. They would put one in there among all of the negative emotions just to have a contrast, and it was happiness. Usually it was just happiness. And she was like, no.
There's much more to life.
There's way more.
To our emotional tapestry.
Yeah, there's way more richness to our emotional tapestry. And not only that, but they're actually really valuable opportunities in people's lives. And so that was so it was really fun to kind of come full circle. And now Barb is my colleague here and awesome friend and collaborator.
Cool. That's really awesome. But yeah, I'm also thinking of Jane Dudden's work, right?
Yeah. Jane is a wonderful researcher and really a pioneer in this area.
Yeah. So the whole concept of a high quality relationship seems to dovetail so nicely with positive interpersonal processes. They kind of go together, like, I'm trying to think of an analogy.
Like they're like almost the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Like a hand in a glove, maybe.
Like strawberry jam and blueberry jam.
You think those go well together?
Oh, yes.
No.
Anyway. Yeah.
No,
they both jam.
That's true. They are both jams. What about like strawberry mango?
I think that's Sharon Salzberg, who also belongs there. So yes, and I think she'd be okay that I just likened her to that particular flavor. But anyway, yeah, so there's this kind of, it's nice when that happens. It's nice when there's the confluence of ideas. That's what we want in science. You want that, right? So that's a good thing. There's confluences. I thought we could talk about some interesting nuances that I've seen in the literature. And, I think it'd be fun to kind of just chat with you what you think about it. So I think there's this emerging idea that positive psychology is also contextual, and that like we shouldn't put these absolute labels on our emotions or actions or behaviors or traits, even traits. Like, for instance, I'm not a big fan of labeling emotions positive or negative, because some seemingly positive emotions can be like, if you go to a funeral and you're in a chipper mood and you're like, I'm so happy, people will look at you like, inappropriate time for positive emotions, and a little bit of, and that's just one example. There's plenty of negative emotions that we want to not evaporate from our system, that like are important. So I've tended to like to just be descriptive and describe the experience, like comfortable exuberant, uncomfortable, painful, like actually like describe as clearly as possible actually what the experience of the emotion is without labeling whether or not that's positive or negative. That's sure the perspective I've started to take in my own research. And I just wanted to throw that out there and think what you thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I absolutely agree with you, and I really respect that position. And it's helpful because it gives me an opportunity to actually really clarify that when I'm talking about when I say positive emotion, I mean the valence. So in the moment that you're experiencing it, is it generally enjoyable? Is it more or less pleasant? And so the more pleasant it feels when you're experiencing it, the more positive. And so I also, as an emotions researcher, am comfortable with the idea that people can have, and actually as a meditator, as an emotions researcher and a meditator, I'm comfortable with the idea that people can experience or kind of co-experience positive and negative emotions simultaneously. So this comes up actually when talking about gratitude. I think some people mistake sometimes people mistake situations that cause gratitude for situations that cause indebtedness, or, just because someone does something for you,
servitude.
It makes you beholden to them. And so therefore, and just by kind of objectively describing the situation, they would assume that you have this. But I would say, based on my research, that indebtedness is a negative feeling, and it's a negative emotion. And it's a more you might say uncomfortable, unpleasant emotion, whereas gratitude is a pleasant emotion, and they can kind of co-occur even within moments of each other. So you might think like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome, you didn't have to do that for me. And you feel this gratitude, and then immediately followed by, oh gosh, there's no way I can repay that person. And that's okay. For my definition, it still works to kind of have both. And then it helps me to make additional predictions based on valence. So Barb Fredrickson's broaden and build theory really taps into the valence component as providing these opportunities for broadening your perspective. And I have another paper with a student where he has this really cool series of studies showing that for emotions that are experienced as being more pleasant, when we experience those emotions, we actually experience greater agency. And so valence is a real dimension, and it really has these different psychological implications. And so for me, that's why it makes sense. And so far, I'm comfortable with continuing to call the more pleasantly experienced emotions as positive emotions. And I absolutely agree that those don't always produce positive, or I would say beneficial outcomes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective as well. And I think that it has become a little unwieldy for me in trying so hard to do this. It's like someone who wants to that's just determined in our society today to replace all gender pronouns with gender neutral. And so you try to make sure everything, and it's hard because you're living in a world that you're going against a grain. This new book I'm working on, I set out the principle in the beginning that I don't want to use the label positive or negative. But once I set myself to that task, I'm actually finding it's I keep slipping. It's so much easier to say positive or negative as opposed, I'm I get into all these tricky situations because then I say, well, comfortable. No, it's not really comfortable. That doesn't really describe all experience is a positive emotion, but it's not comfortable. So what do I label that? So now I actually have to invent different subclasses of experiential labels for different classes of emotions. And I'm doing that, but I don't know if I'm right. And it's certainly just my subjective impression. I'm like, oh, well, to me, that feels not pleasant. It's not just pleasant. I mean, would you describe, transcendent love as pleasant? No, right? Right?
No, there's more to it, but that's one of the core features of it.
Yeah. Oh, of course. But it's that doesn't fully describe it. I want to really nail how certain things really feel, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's a lot easier from just a descriptive communication perspective. Sometimes just from two people communicating with each other easily, there are certain benefits for certain things. So anyway, thank you for that perspective. Now you have a specific theory I wanted to talk about called the find, remind, and bind theory of gratitude. You positive emotion researchers love catchy names for things. You all love that stuff. Okay. It is catchy, I will admit. I know. I feel like that's a very Barbara Fredrickson thing to do. So, yeah, could you tell me a little bit about that theory of yours and how it may is differentiated from some other theories of gratitude in the literature?
Yeah. So I'll start with what the find, refine, and bind theory is. And that is that moments of gratitude. Actually, let me start with my definition of gratitude.
Great.
Because that matters. Because a lot of people use gratitude in different ways in their everyday life. And so when I'm talking about the emotion of gratitude, it's an emotion that a person can experience when someone else does something nice for them. And a starting point that I like to use is that we don't always notice when somebody does something nice for us objectively. Somebody else might say, that was really nice of them to do, but you might not even notice because you expect it from the person. We might have a lot of different kinds of emotions when they do this nice thing for us. Some of them might be negative. I mean, you seem like a very nice person, but I sometimes feel like, what do they want from me? Every once in a while, you're like, uh-oh, what's going on here?
That's human nature, right?
It's totally human nature. Or like you might think, oh gosh, why did they think I would want that? But anyway, sometimes their gesture really stands out and you feel grateful. It's this positive emotion. And so what I say is that moments when we experience gratitude, it's that we notice that someone else has really gone out of their way on our behalf and that they might make a good relationship partner. And it's not necessarily explicit, but so we can gratitude helps alert us to people in our environment who are good for us, who are looking out for our best interests. So it helps to find new people who maybe we didn't notice before, or, we kind of get used to people who we have regular interactions with, and it might remind us of, oh, that's what I love about you. And the emotion kind of coordinates your mind and body and behavior in that moment to help set you up to actually bind yourself more closely with that other person. So we might do things to make sure that they know that we really appreciated it or that we care about them too. And ultimately, my data now shows that those kinds of gestures actually can help draw the other person closer into the relationship, even closer than they were when they first did the nice thing. They probably did the nice thing for you because they liked you in the first place. And then, so we have some nice evidence about that process.
Thank you for explaining that. Just wanted to take this moment to thank you all for your support of the podcast over the years. It's been a real privilege to do this podcast for you all for over the past 3.5 years. If you'd like to further support the podcast, I wanted to let you know a few things you could do to help make this podcast a better experience for you all. First, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the Psychology Podcast on iTunes. This would help make the show more prominent on iTunes and increase our listenership. I believe you can subscribe both on your iPhone and on your computer. Second, it'd be great if you could give the show a rating and review in iTunes. I definitely read and appreciate all of the reviews. Another thing you can do is donate some money to the show by going to thepsychologypodcast.com and clicking on the link Support the Podcast at the bottom of the page. That's thepsychologypodcast.com. Thanks to the donations we've received so far, we've been able to increase the audio quality substantially. So your donations really do go to helping to make the show a better listening experience. Thanks again for your incredible support of the show over the years. I do this show for you all because I truly love sharing my enthusiasm and love of the mind, brain, and creativity. Okay, now back to the show. So I'm trying to think if bind is the right word because it's like you're not saying you're then bound.
No.
So there's a difference between bind and bound, I guess, right?
Oh.
Like you're not saying that like by doing this you are actually as a contract. You're not actually. It's not like a contextual binding.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good. Because that's not conducive to positive interpersonal relationships to feel as though you are actually bound to the person, right? That's not good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and that's the thing that differentiates it a little bit. We have to kind of have these tit for tat relationships with people just to go through everyday social life. This is how we get through the world. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. Mm-hmm. If I don't repay a favor, then you're not going to want to do that favor for me necessarily in the future. Mm-hmm. So we have to have that kind of exchange type of relationship with lots of people just to kind of navigate social life. But this is a different kind of potential relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's based on this idea that like, wow, this person just seems to be open to looking out for my best interests. And it's a qualitatively different kind of experience. And so the emotion really motivates you to it's like a desire. You really want to make sure that they
Yeah.
know, oh my gosh, you're so great. Did you see what this person just did? I can't believe you did that. This
Yeah.
like, it's more of an approach orientation.
Right. And it also seems to be something, though, that is not tied to that necessity for tit for tat. Like, we tend to have gratitude towards people who, like you said, don't seem like they want something in return.
Yes.
That seems to increase the likelihood we'll have gratitude for a person. But what about this sort of like just general general gratitude that one can cultivate as just a way of being in the world? David Eden's a collaborator of mine. He's at Penn, and he's doing great work on transcendent experiences. And he laid out in a review paper he wrote recently, actually, Jonathan Haidt, your mentor, I was a co-author of that paper, laying out a whole self-transcendent emotion continuum. And gratitude is on that continuum, as there are self-transcendent positive emotions, which are different than other positive emotions. So it seems like gratitude falls within kind of a unique class of positive emotions there that allow us to really transcend self-interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we find is so I can come back to the question about domain general gratitude. I have a different answer about that, but
cool.
Regarding gratitude as its self-transcendent emotion, that's really what our most recent evidence is showing, is that we've been trying to do some comparisons between the social consequences of feeling something like joy, which would be, I got a positive outcome for myself. So just perfectly, it's a wonderful experience, as opposed to gratitude, which is, I got a positive outcome for myself because of your praiseworthy actions.
Yeah.
And so
it's elevating, as Haidt would say.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's because of the praiseworthiness of your actions. And so we've been doing work to show that the social consequences of gratitude go beyond just feeling joy. And so if I feel grateful to you, and you will experience a consequence, because my gratitude I will naturally be inclined to make sure that you know it in a way that, really calls out what it is about what you did that was praiseworthy. And then that has an impact on you.
Absolutely. And it's fun looking at your work and looking at the development of your thinking. And I'm thinking also how that interacts with the development of your collaborators' thinking. So at the time in 2005, when you were working with Jonathan Haidt, had he come up with the elevating emotions construct yet? Was that there?
Yeah.
Did that exist? Yeah.
Yeah. So he, when I first started working with him, he had just maybe he had published some stuff with Dacher Keltner on awe, I think, right around that time. And then he was publishing some stuff on elevation. And I think right around that time, he won the Templeton Prize as well for his work on elevation. And so the reason that I actually started working with John was on my interview with him, or one of the I don't know, in my first meetings with him, he told me about this idea of elevation, and he was like, we need some data. And so I said, that sounds great. I'm really intrigued by that. And then we wanted to compare it with a few other positive emotions. And one of the things that he said was, something that I've been noticing is that elevation is when you see another person, it's not related to you. You just see one person do something nice for a third party.
Yeah.
And so there's no benefit to you, but you see this, and it can be really moving to see that. Actually, there are a lot of commercials where they have this kind of like pay it forward thing. Like you see someone help somebody pick up something, and then they go off and do something. So that's what elevation is. And he said, when I ask people about their experiences of when they see this happen and they have this feeling, a lot of people say that they want to thank the person who originally, was kind to someone else.
Yeah.
And so he's like, we need to know more about gratitude. And so I jumped into the literature, and I would just say the literature there was some really healthy reviews out there, but it just didn't resonate with me, especially because Barb's work was coming out around that time about positive emotions. And it was all about economics. The gratitude literature at the time was really about economics, and it didn't seem infused with this idea of broadening or these real opportunities.
Bob Emmons' research around that time was economic oriented?
No. Bob Emmons was doing research on counting your blessings, which is very positive. Right. And there was a really foundational view. McCullough and Emmons, Anna Kilpatrick and Larson. Is a really wonderful review. And it was a review of the literature that had been done. And so they concluded things that are still, I would say, are still true to this day, that when you experience, now I won't remember the 3 things that they concluded about gratitude, but that, let me try. Let's give myself a little test. So that gratitude is a morality detector. So when someone else does something good, it's a moral reinforcer. So when I thank you, you're more likely to do something nice for me in the future again, or like the same thing again. And that was all stuff that had been demonstrated. And then there's one more thing. It's about repayment or something like that. And that's all totally accurate. And it was based on literature that other people had, studies that other people had done. And they weren't interested in gratitude as an emotion. They were really interested in like the question, actually a totally different question, which is like, why would anybody ever be nice to someone?
Yeah. Why would it evolve? Yeah.
Yeah. And well, no, this is about altruism. So their question was like, why would anyone ever?
Reciprocal altruism.
Yeah. It wasn't McCullough and stuff, but like the people who were doing the research were like, why would you ever be nice to someone? Well, it's probably because the other person, of course, feels grateful when you do something nice for them, which we now know isn't true. And then the more gratitude they feel, the more likely they will be to repay you for the thing. So then your costs are balanced. And so that's the way that previous researchers had kind of come at that question. And I just came at it from a different perspective of really like looking at emotions and thinking about positive emotions in these like really uplifting experiences. So again, like that review is awesome. Everything that they've concluded, almost everything that they conclude. I have a little twist on one of the conclusions that I think adds to this relationship side of things, but everything that they concluded is like really well supported, but it just felt like it didn't resonate with me because I didn't have that. When I experience gratitude, I think, oh my gosh, you didn't have to do that. But so yeah, it was an awesome review. But then Bob Evans's work was the thing that he led at the time was about counting your blessings. And that's really another way that people think about gratitude a lot. And that gets back to your question about general orientation toward life. Yeah. I can say more about that if you want.
There's like a analog to loving kindness for all humans, even your enemies. There's an analog in the gratitude world. It seems like there's a domain general like brother or sister to that, right?
So like the generalized.
Yeah, because just like, loving kindness meditation, you can like generalize it to all the cosmos.
Yeah.
You can go all the way up with that one. You can do the same thing with gratitude.
I like it.
And you can go all the way down as well and be like, I'm only gonna have gratitude. Like, some people are like, I only have gratitude towards people who are loyal to me.
Like the Godfather version.
Yeah, there's like an in-group gratitude. Only. So I really think that like, there's a continuum of gratitude there of in terms of like how expansive is yourself.
Oh, that's really interesting to think about. Yeah, because I think about it in a really different way. So now you've got me.
I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if it makes any sense. But
yeah, well, I know. So I try to make a kind of a dichotomy for my own brain.
Yeah.
When I'm doing my research, which is like I name that the other kind of gratitude, which I'll define right now is like appreciating the good things in your life, like understanding that you have these really amazing blessings in your, wow, this good thing happened to me, and I have, like the sky is blue or whatever. And for my own ease, I call that appreciation, which is a more cognitive construct, and it's easier for me. But I do agree with you that I often think about how appreciation came to be. Because the other way that I think about appreciation, the way I just defined it, is as a meta positive emotion.
Yeah, I like the idea of a meta positive emotion.
So you have it, yeah.
I feel like there is a superordinate category of a way of being in this world that blends, and I'm going to throw some things out here. It blends gratitude. It's like, okay, you tell me what you get when you get the perfect fusing of these things. Gratitude, mindfulness, savoring, death acceptance. I'm throwing that one in there.
That came from out of left field.
But no, it's not. I really think that when you combine these things, you have a way of seeing and perceiving the world that you're like constantly on, as Abraham Maslow referred to it, as like a high plateau. Not the peak experience, but you living your life turned on all the time.
Yeah.
So I think there is this, you said meta, but there's a superordinate something that construct that hasn't been well studied in the field, but that lies above some of these things. So anyway, something to think about and study. Well, something to study, not just think about. We're scientists.
Think about and study. Think about some more.
Anyway,
no, I like that idea though. It's pretty cool.
But,
and the other thing about appreciation is that, I mean, there's some pretty good evidence, or gratitude, or like having a grateful disposition, and just kind of having a way of being in the world where you get that there's a lot of goodness in your life, and you can see it in the everyday little things. You don't need to have somebody do something for you. You don't need to have an amazing, luxurious house, or whatever the things are that you need in your life. But just as a way of being in the world, I was thinking about it actually, walking into my office, leading up to our conversation today, that it seems like the data suggests that it's actually necessary for mental health. So there's some cool, so that's something else to play around with. And now I might have.
Tell me what's cool. You're going to tell me something cool, and then you just didn't tell me.
Oh, sorry. So,
I'm on the edge of my seat. When you say you can tell me something cool.
Data really tend to suggest that. So people who are not mentally, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's just a correlation between being a grateful person and having better mental health. Okay. But that is actually like a necessary precondition. And I could write that paper, but I can't pull all the data points for you right now.
No, I mean, you're obviously hitting on something really existentially profound. I mean, you're kind of making a case that, even though you haven't said it, is like the famous answer to the question, why not kill myself? Like we as scientists need to answer that question as well-being researchers. And I think that's actually a good question for us positive psychologists to help clarify our priority list of things that we study. And it sounds to me like you're saying one of those reasons is that we can generate gratitude in our lives. And that's almost an essential. Yeah. So I think this is actually a really interesting question. Even within the field, what are the essentials, and what are the luxuries of, I'm trying to think right now, because I like them all. They're all good. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what's a luxury? Like, well, no, that was not a luxury for me. Awe, no, you know what? If you take awe away from my life, no. Gratitude, no. Yeah, I'm just trying to think, are there any luxuries? There certainly are some that differ in their strength of correlation with well-being, but I don't know if that's the right way to answer the question. But anyway, so you in 2009 wrote this paper with Jonathan Haidt on what you called other praising emotions. And it seemed like you divided it into two classes, not two classes, but you differentiate other praising emotions such as elevation, which is a response to moral excellence, gratitude, and admiration. You differentiated them from joy and amusement. So linking that to your most recent work on positive interpersonal processes, it seems like you make a differentiation then. Ergo, in your positive interpersonal processes work, you make a differentiation between in our relationships, other praising emotions versus other positive emotions. Do you make that same differentiation in your positive interpersonal processes work now?
Oh, no, because I've come to decide that, well, especially, Shelley Gable's work on capitalization is just awesome, and everybody should go find out everything they can about it.
Agreed.
To do the reading. But that's about joy. That's actually about your own joy. And one of the things that we found in that 2009 paper was this echoes what Shelley talks about, and just coincidentally, which is that, I think in our paper, like, we asked people what they did when they experienced joy, when something good happened to them. And I think I'm right, like 80% of the people said that they told somebody else about it. They're like, and we called it broadcasting. They told other people. And that's all of Shelley's work, is what I described is about this that she had doing separately and in more wonderful ways. But it's just a nice coincidence, or is it? But anyway, so what we found there is, like, people still do this kind of social thing with their own emotion. And then, like I said, Shelley's work has really shown that matters too. You can really make great connections. And actually, the best way of responding when someone shares good news with you is just to be excited for them. If you want to preserve the relationship, and if you maybe there was something, we sometimes have negative feelings about our, like, oh, I don't know if I would have made that choice, when somebody shares some good news with us, but like just being there for them and being excited about the thing that they're excited about because you care and you know that they care about it actually is a really cool opportunity for connections and important connections. So she shows that those opportunities for connections are even better predictors of your feelings of support from that person, your perceptions that that person gives you support, than when that person actually gives you support.
Wow. Like
So,
when you say something negative.
in negative times.
Yeah.
In negative times. And so those positive moments between people really matter. And
it's like a test.
These are everyday things like, oh, I got a paper accepted, or that's not an everyday thing, but I got a paper accepted.
It's a way to test people. See how, I feel like it's like a test. It's a way of testing people. Like, if you really want to test your friendship, it seems counterintuitive. Exactly. But if I said to someone, tell me the best way to test a friendship, it's like, are they there when I need them? It's like, no, I would actually, see how genuinely excited they are with your positive news. It seems like that's a very contextual thing, though, because it seems like just as positive that can be when you seem authentic, if you react to someone's positive news in a positive way, but you don't come across as though you genuinely care, that seems to be just as bad. It seems to be, that's another one of these contextual things I want to point out here, because it's like, I was really sick the other day, just really high fever, and someone was telling me some good news of theirs, and I really inside cared, but I was like, they couldn't overlook the fact that like I was sick. Like it was just like, oh, you don't really care, and it's like, my gosh, what do I do in this moment?
You do everything you can.
This person's taking it so personally, and like I'm like, trust me, inside, I'm really excited.
I'm jumping.
I just can't breathe right now because I have a high fever. But you know what I mean? It seems like people can be really sensitive with people as well. Yeah. We all just need to maybe be a little more like, as well human and with each other. But yeah.
Exactly. No, and I mean, sincerity is the thing. All of our research, Shelley's work and my work and a lot of the work in the relationships domain really emphasizes that these things work when the other person who's responding is perceived to actually be understanding and actually seems to care and actually seems to be validating. That's that kind of effect that it has on you that can then translate to these downstream, feeling like that person is around for you in the future. So yeah, sometimes, people are strange and that's why we study them. Actually, I would say wonderfully strange. And I love people.
Well, that's what we do. I mean, comedians live for the absurdity of the world, and I don't think that psychologists are fundamentally different in their motivations than comedians, to be honest, except we just are more nerdy maybe in how we go about our methods. So can you tell me a little bit about some meta-analyses on gratitude interventions?
Again.
Yeah.
I can tell you a little bit. This is basically the meta, and really it's like two sentences. The meta-analysis.
Oh, take your time.
No, I mean, it's like the meta-analyses of gratitude interventions suggest that they work, especially for people who need them the most. So there are lots of ways that people have done gratitude interventions. And I would say, because I've been watching literature for a few years, I think researchers have started to discover more effective ways of having people do these interventions. And so I think some of the earlier work had a little bit of a lighter touch. And so it was maybe harder to have a big impact on everybody who was in it. And some of the more recent stuff, so Sonia Lieber-Mirsky has a really impressive body of work on these gratitude interventions. And I've noticed that they have turned more toward having people do interpersonal gratitude. So they actually say somebody that they feel grateful to, or they actually so they kind of acknowledge somebody else's actions, as opposed to counting your blessings, or they have them maybe write a note to that person. And so those are some of the more, so it's kind of interesting that the literature has shifted a little bit. And one of the reasons for that, I would say, is because we know that relationships are so robustly associated with mental and physical health. And so in my mind, it really makes sense that to the extent that thinking about the nice things that other people do for us and feeling grateful for those things can help us to feel more close and connected to those people and feel like we have a safe, set of relationships, then that would really naturally lead to having better mental health. I don't know that many people have, or anybody's really tested that idea carefully, but it's, it makes a lot of sense from the literature. So I would say there's a effectiveness of the interventions has started to get better. So the meta-analyses that I've seen really support the conclusion that the gratitude interventions really work well for people who need them the most. And that's one of the reasons that I have this idea that gratitude seems to be necessary, a necessary precondition. Because people who already feel grateful, they're not going to move up higher in their mental health necessarily. It's kind of a weird argument that I'm coming up with off the cuff. But anyway, so if it's the case that, yes, so basically, if you're doing really well, you've got fine mental health or reasonably good mental health, you don't have depression, then one possibility is that when I ask you to do a gratitude intervention, like where you're writing about the good things in your life, you don't have very much room to move up on the happiness scale. For example, you fill up the happiness scale and you're pretty happy already, and so there's not a lot of room to move up. So maybe that's true. Or it might be that people really need people who already have gratitude in their lives, who are already happy. Maybe they already have gratitude in their lives. Maybe they already count their blessings on a regular basis and think about the good things in their lives.
So like a restricted range.
So then that might be why the gratitude interventions don't do as much for people who are already mentally healthy. But in either case, it seems like gratitude feels like it's a necessary part of the equation.
Is that right though? Because maybe it really is an inverted U-shaped curve sort of phenomenon.
Totally possible. Yeah. I'm making this up on the fly.
Well, I mean, so am I in terms of No, it's totally, we're just thinking through possibilities.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I would say about the gratitude interventions is that they really do show a lot of promise. Sonia has been talking a lot recently about potential variations. So they might not be great for everybody, and sometimes they might backfire for some people. I couldn't tell you the specifics of the findings that she has, but I have seen a few. I saw her give a talk about a year ago, and she was going over it because she has a massive amount of data.
Was that at the IPA conference?
Yeah, but
I was thinking the same. I'm thinking of the same talk. We were both in the room together.
Oh, cool! Oh, that's so great. Yeah, so and it was a great talk, and I mean, so she was really going through, and I think there was one consideration is a cultural consideration and the extent to which gratitude is valued, or the extent to which thinking about the good things that other people do for you might also bring up indebtedness simultaneously. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. And so then you would have this kind of negative obligatory feeling as opposed to feeling like, and now you're like, I forgot to do something for this other person, and I really get on that.
I'm bound.
Yeah, exactly. In addition to all the other stuff. So it's great work.
And she also, which is why I'm thinking the inverted U-shaped curves thing, because she said that there seems to be a dosage effect. There's such a thing as too much gratitude practices during your week, that it's like a hedonic, too much of anything is, Schwartz and Grant, their paper on all the character strengths, too much of anything, you kind of get burnt out. You can get burnt out with gratitude, or at least if not burnt out, it's not as novel.
Right. And I would say not only novel, but I don't know if you've ever tried a gratitude practice, but
I have.
Oh, you have? Good. How did it go for you?
Really, really great. I find that gratitude, infusing it more in my daily life, really shifts my perspective in a very positive direction. So for me personally, it's been very, very good.
Oh, good. Yeah. That's my experience as well.
Yeah.
But if you do it too much, then so I would say not only maybe novelty, but maybe authenticity slips a little bit too. So you feel like you have to find something, and so it's like, that thing, but it's not like genuine. Oh yeah, that was this great moment, or this person's, or I just really appreciated that swim this morning, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. There we go. The appreciation versus gratitude, are they the same thing?
I have worked it into my vocabulary.
Oh, wow. We have such an evolution even within a 1 hour chat of well, I want to end with not gratitude, but another topic that when I was digging through your papers, I found this amazing paper that you wrote with Jonathan on moral amplification and the emotions that attach us to saints and demons. And it really, I found it so thought-provoking. Could you mind if we talk about it a little bit? You argue that a part of human nature is to divide the world into angels and demons. That's like maybe a social cognitive bias that we have built into ourselves. This has some pretty deep implications, right? For lots of things. Anyway, I thought I'm going to stop talking about your own paper and tell me what you think.
It's been a long time since
I do dig up old things. Yes.
No, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about the paper because I very sincerely haven't thought about that for quite a while. But it is the case that praise and blame, I mean, even if you just take this dimension of praise and blame, we do very quickly do that. And then, the argument is that morality really amplifies that. And that's as much as I've got.
It seems to me that too much gratitude is not good because it seems like we need the contrast in our lives.
Yes.
This is my way of integrating everything that we talked about, including that paper. It seems like, we won't know whether or not something's gratitude until we see a devil. By devil, I mean someone who's out to get you, and it's obvious that they are not giving you something for purely selfless reasons, right?
Yeah.
So that when we see it, because there's the contrast.
Yeah.
And then we appreciate it even more. Anyway, look, I can't thank you enough for the work you've done for the field, and chatting with me today. Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Yeah. It's been such a pleasure, such a joy. It's nice to see you.
Oh, yay. That was a very positive interpersonal process. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Psychology Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to react in some way to something you heard, I encourage you to join in the discussion at thepsychologypodcast.com. That's thepsychologypodcast.com. Also, please add a rating and review of the Psychology Podcast on iTunes. Thanks for being such a great supporter of the podcast, and tune in next time for more on the mind, brain, behavior, and creativity.